I have to do my part.
If you have questions about it, certainly. But I'm not too. Especially this one.
Yeah. Good evening. I'd like to call the Monday, March 14th meeting of the Lee County Zoning Board of Appeals to order. Would you call the roll, please?
Chris Forrester.
Here.
Craig Burrow.
Here.
Mike Pratt.
Here.
Gene Bothy. Glenn Hughes is not present at the moment.
With that, since we move the meeting forward, I'd like to turn the meeting over at this time to our facilitator, Judge Slavin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I apologize to everyone for the upset at the last meeting. Entirely my fault. Please accept my apology. My wife has, so if you guys do, I'm whole. This is calling out a recess Lee County Zoning Board of Appeals hearing on petition number 21P 1566. Sauk Valley Hydrogen LLC's request for a special use permit to construct a solar energy system in Nelson Township. If you happen to be listening and have lost but want to be on Zoom, but have lost the information, the Zoom meeting ID is 915-3923-9154. And the password, as it always has been and will be, is 209840. If you want to watch and listen on YouTube but not participate, with your computer or cell phone, use your browser, go to www.youtube.com. In the search bar, type Lee County IL, short for Illinois, Zoning Board of Appeals. No, you don't need to be concerned with upper or lowercase letters. Find the session date you want, which is presumably March 14th today, and voila, you should see us moving and talking. If you want technical assistance, feel free to call D. Duffy's technical assistance hotline, 815-973-3449. Besides the roll that was called, I also note present at the hearing, in the hearing room tonight, are indeed the Honorable D. Duffy, zoning officer, her able assistant, green energy coordinator, Alice Henkel, the Honorable Charlie Boonstra, State's Attorney of Lee County. On Zoom, we have the petitioner's attorney, Mr. Blazer. There are 3 petitioners' representatives present. A member of the Lee County IT staff is present. The court reporter is present, as is obviously himself. We still just got 2 on Zoom. Okay, very good. Also on Zoom is apparently another representative of the petitioner. All right, that makes and there's 1 interested party in the courtroom. That's 14 people in the courtroom, 14 necessaries, and 1 interested party, making 15, and 2 on Zoom. When we left off, and entering the room is Mr. Rex Meyer now, another fine member of the Zoning Board of Appeals. When we left off last time, March 3rd, I'd opened the meeting, but that was all we did, given the time constraints. So the process, as I explained then, the process is that first the petitioner goes first. And Mr. Blazer, assuming you can hear me, if you have any opening remarks you want to make, that'd be fine. Otherwise, if not, you can call your first witness.
I can, Judge. Thank you. And I'll make a brief opening. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. First of all, I want to tell you how much we appreciate the ability to do this remotely, particularly these days. All right. I'm Mike Blazer, as Judge Slavin said. I'm the attorney for Sauk Valley Hydrogen LLC. Sauk Valley Hydrogen is part of the Invenergy group of companies. Invenergy may be familiar to some of you. It developed and for several years has been operating the Nelson Energy Center in your county, a 600 megawatt combined cycle gas powered power plant. And it is in the process of developing on the same property what's known as a peaker plant, which operates during times of peak load. That'll be a 350 megawatt facility. So the project we're talking about here, assuming it's permitted and built, would be the third facility on that property. Just by way of background, Invenergy is the largest privately owned renewable energy developer in North America. It's an experienced power plant developer. It has developed multi-gigawatts of gas-fired generation, wind power generation, solar, and battery storage. And it's headquartered in Chicago. We have a number of projects that we've developed throughout Illinois, through the Midwest, really throughout the United States, Canada, Central and South America, Europe, and the Far East. Sauk Valley Hydrogen is requesting a special use permit for what in this case is a two-part power generation project. The first part, and they're tied into each other, the first part is an 845, up to 845 kilowatt. And I highlight that word kilowatt, not megawatt, and I'll explain why I'm highlighting that in a moment. Solar energy system, solar panels, which I know you folks are familiar with. And then that facility will be used to operate an up to 24 kilogram per hour green hydrogen facility. And those two things together, we are referring collectively as a power generation facility, as that term is used in the Lee County zoning ordinance. What will ultimately be a state-of-the-art hydrogen energy system. Nelson, I mentioned, Sauk Valley is proposed to be sited on a parcel that's just over 5 acres on what is now a parking area at the Nelson plant property. Nelson plant property altogether is just under 131 acres. This project, as I said, would cover just over, it's actually 5.13 acres if you look at the application. Now, I highlighted the word kilowatt when I said up to 845 kilowatt, because I want to try and put that in perspective with another project that I know you're all familiar with that was recently before you, and that's the South Dixon solar project. South Dixon, as we understand it, was a 500 megawatt project. As I said, ours is just over 8 kilowatts. So South Dixon was actually over 600 times larger than what this one would be. South Dixon required 3,850 acres. Ours will require just over 5 acres. So South Dixon, as far as that one is concerned, is 770 times larger than the one we're proposing. South Dixon encompassed 51 parcels. This one will encompass a portion of one parcel that an affiliated company, another member of the Invenergy group, currently owns. The South Dixon project impacted 25 landowners. This one impacts none. And in South Dixon, all of the zoning and for that project was agricultural. The Nelson property is zoned heavy industrial, I3 in your zoning ordinance. The project, as you'll hear from the witnesses, or our principal witness, will pair electrolyzers, which Mr. Lill, who's sitting there bobbing back and forth, will be talking about shortly. Basically, what you're going to hear is this is a very well established, it's a process that's been around for decades, if not hundreds of years. It's a process by which water, the molecules of water, H2O, are separated to get the H2, the hydrogen, apart from the oxygen. The oxygen is released into the atmosphere, and it's the hydrogen that's then used. And it will be powered by a small solar field. And that's why this project is being referred to as generating green hydrogen, because its power source will be completely green. It'll be a small solar array. Just to introduce the folks who are here, there's Stephen Lill sitting over there to the right of the table. He'll be our principal witness. Mr. Lill is the project engineer for the project. With him is Joel Schrader. I don't believe Joel will be testifying unless Stephen faints. I don't think that's going to happen. And then on Zoom, we have Michael Hankard. We don't plan to call him. We have him available for questions. Mr. Hankard is the acoustical consultant who generated the noise report that's attached to our application. The noise report confirms that this will be orders of magnitude below the noise limits that are established by the Illinois Pollution Control Board. So we don't believe it's necessary to call him. However, if there are questions, he is available to answer questions. And with all that said, I'm going to try and limit my talking as much as possible so you can hear from the person who can more readily describe the project. What we hope is that at the end of this process, you will find that we've met all of the relevant requirements of the applicable provisions of the Lee County zoning ordinance, and we will request that you recommend approval of our SUP application to the county board. And that's all I have, Judge Slavin.
Okay, Mr. Lill, stand up and raise your right hand, please. Tight quarters. You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Have a seat right next to me. If you need stuff, bring it up. Stuff to screen share.
Ask him. Jonathan does have the.
Yeah, I just heard mention of that, Judge Slavin. I know we will be using a PowerPoint during my direct exam. So hopefully
I just asked the
that'll
IT guy if he had a screen share file, and he does. So
okay,
Yep.
Great.
great. Folks in the audience, I see one interested party. If you well, you mean you have hard copies of the PowerPoint? Yeah. If you mark all those petitioners exhibit 1, please. Have to take a time out while we do that, apparently. PET number 1. Yep. Because each zoning board member will get one. I'll get one, court reporter gets one, state attorney gets one, zoning office gets one. And while that's happening, I'll note for the record that Mr. Hughes, another honorable member of the zoning board, just entered the hearing room. Thank you, madam. I see out there, I think an interested party. If you'd like a copy, raise your hand. And guy in the blue shirt, not Glenn Hughes. Charlie and you, and you're all set. All right, Mr. Blazer, you may inquire.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Lill, would you state your name for the record, please, and spell your last name?
Stephen Lill, Lill.
Could you give us your educational background, please, after high school?
I had my my undergrad in mechanical engineering from Northern Illinois.
And you work as an engineer?
Yes, I have been working with Invenergy now for 6 years in our thermal engineering group. My boss is over here, Joel Schroeder.
Making sure you do it right. Could you describe generally your experience in thermal engineering?
So we look at what's called heat balances, and it's looking at how much fuel a gas turbine uses and trying to come up with best configurations for different size projects. And as that thermal group has over time, now we're starting to look into more interesting projects like this one here.
Could you describe your role with respect to the Sauk Valley Hydrogen Project?
I have been project engineer, acting as project manager, working with our engineer to put together a specification and work with different original equipment manufacturers or OEMs for procuring equipment.
Judge Slavin, with your permission, I just want to have the witness identify some documents, which I believe everybody has, that were provided back on March 3rd. The first one would be actually the biggest one, which is our application with appendices A through U. Do you typically make that a county exhibit, or you want that to be petitioners?
I do, but I'm not going to ask everybody to number it. I'm just going to call it petitioners number 2.
Great, thank you.
Just in case we get enough that we have to keep track, maybe not, but.
For our purposes, we're only going to have, I think, 5 altogether. So I think we'll be safe. So Mr. Lill, you can identify the application and its appendices?
Sure. So in the application, it is, I think, the 6th page, and there'll be a list A through U, listing all of the different appendices. Do you want me to go through each one?
We will in a moment. Did you have a role in preparing the application?
Yes, sir.
And what was your role?
We put the application together. Joel reviewed it, and it went through a couple of revisions of me and Joel putting it together for the most part. And then we pulled in information from the different original from the different manufacturers. Exhibits I through K are some of those. And then there are different, like you said, with Hankered, they put together the consulting report for our noise study.
All right, let's go through those very briefly, just for the record, so everyone understands what comprises the application. Just briefly describe what appendices A through U are.
Okay. So Exhibit A is a topo and boundary survey that was performed by Willett and Hoffman. It's a survey of the 5-acre site. The Exhibit B is Lee County petition for special use permit. There's an original petition that we submitted, and you guys will be receiving an updated version with the corrected entity name. Exhibit C is a pipeline and utility survey showing the different culverts and other underground utilities on the 5-acre site. Exhibit D is a project plot plan that our engineer of record put together for us, overlaid on top of that 5-acre site. Appendix E is a FEMA firm map showing the flood zone. Exhibit F is a surface water drainage map showing contour lines of land. Exhibit G is the stormwater pollution prevention plan, which outlines the stormwater plan that we'll have in place here. Exhibit H is the noise analysis evaluation that Hanker Environmental put together. Exhibit I is the LONGi module specification, or our solar panel OEM.
Let me stop you there for just a moment. Longi, which is for the record, LONGI, that's the manufacturer of the solar panels.
That's a question.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. You can continue.
Appendix J is next tracker inverter specification. This is the manufacturer of the trackers that the solar panels will sit on top of. Exhibit J was the inverter specification. Exhibit K is the tracker specification, both of which are manufactured by Next Tracker. Exhibit L is the ComEd transformer specifications. Exhibit M is an FAA filing results report that when you are submitting a solar energy system, they have you fill out a request, and that's the results, which are showing a determination of no hazard. Exhibit M is the Ford Solar Glare Report, and that's a report that goes into evaluating if there's any glare from the solar panels themselves. Appendix O is an EcoCat inquiry results, which shows of no habitats concerns. Exhibit P is just a pictures appendices. Exhibit Q is the Soil and Water Conservation District email. So we included a couple of emails as we were working through the application. For example, we didn't think that there needed to be a land evaluation service, or I'm forgetting what the S stands for, but
Lisa scoring, LESA scoring.
yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So we had asked if this was needed, and she said no. So we just included that as an exhibit or as an appendices to the application. Appendix R is the road use agreement email. Same idea there. An email with the county engineer stating what our plan was. I'm sorry, I keep saying exhibit. Appendix S is a UL certification email from one of the manufacturers. It was Next Tracker, and it's stating the different UL certification, the different equipment that does not have UL certification, and reasons for why that is, and for when we expect to get UL certification for those pieces of equipment. Appendix T is the decommissioning plan for the solar energy system. And finally, Appendix U is a fire prevention and protection plan that we have for our project.
Thank you, Mr. Lill. All right. The applicant here is Sauk Valley Hydrogen LLC, correct?
Correct.
Now, you mentioned an amended petition, which actually will supersede Appendix B to the application. And Judge Slavin, again, we provided that at the session on March 3rd. I think everybody should have one.
Yeah, it's been filed and
okay.
Copies
We can call that one then petitioners 3.
fine.
Okay. And that one simply, for the record, that one simply reflects that the petitioner is Sauk Valley Hydrogen LLC, not Invenergy Hydrogen LLC, which is Sauk Valley's parent company. And then Mr. Lill, the next one is Sauk Valley Hydrogen Certificate of Good Standing from the Illinois Secretary of State. Is that correct?
Correct.
And Judge Slavin, we ask that that be identified as petitioners 4.
Done.
And then the last one is am I correct, Mr. Lill, is an easement agreement between Invenergy Nelson LLC, the owner of the property on which this facility is proposed to be located, and Sauk Valley Hydrogen, granting an easement to Sauk Valley for the 5.13 acres on which this project is proposed to be built. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And Judge Slavin, we'd ask that that be identified as petitioners 5.
Done.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lill, could you explain what green hydrogen is and why the company views it as an important development goal?
Sure. So green hydrogen is a means for creating hydrogen using a renewable energy source where there are no emissions created in the process. We see this as a valuable energy source, and we think that pairing it with renewable energies could create another method for storing energy.
All right, if we could now go to the PowerPoint. And unfortunately, there aren't slide numbers. So I would ask if we could go to the slide that's entitled Project Overview. Looks like it's the fourth one. Yep, that's it. And I already covered the first part of that in my opening. So let's go down, Mr. Lill, to site benefits. And first of all, taking a look at the aerial photo on the right, could you describe what that is and what it shows?
Yep. So this is a GIS photo looking down at the 130.7 acre Nelson Energy Center parcel. If you look on the southeast corner, there is a blue rectangle that has highlighted the site of interest for Sauk Valley Hydrogen LLC. The benefits for Nelson are bulleted here. There's available land for us. We don't need to go buy more land. It's already zoned industrial. There's water that's needed for the process, and there's water here on this site. The Nelson Energy Center is staffed 24/7 and has an existing workforce that already handles hydrogen. They handle it because it's already used on site for generator cooling. So we'll be replacing what we currently purchase on a monthly basis. And then finally, it's close to our headquarters in Invenergy in downtown Chicago. So we're only 2 hours away.
Now, in terms of the water supply, where does Nelson get its water that will then also be used by this proposed facility?
So Nelson pulls its water from the Rock River, and then they treat it on site, and they'll go through pre-treatment and then more robust water treatment plant that's consisting of 2-pass RO, and we'll be taking some of that higher purity 2-pass RO water.
And could you explain what you mean by 2-pass RO?
So the river water is not very clean when it's coming in, so it gets pre-treated, and the water, as it gets filtered, the first stage are reverse osmosis, gets it to a cleaner stage, and then the second stage, reverse osmosis, gets to it a much higher purity stage. That's the water that's used at the gas plant, and we'll be using some of that high purity water, and it will be under the existing permit that Nelson has currently.
We could go to the next slide, please, that says project objectives. Thank you. And could you describe what that photo is on the right?
So this is a photo of the project site. As Mike mentioned, that it is currently being used as a parking lot. You can see there are cars parked there currently for building the expansion. The road that you see beyond the parking lot is the Nelson Road, so it's facing east. And if you look closely, you can see a fence that surrounds that 5 acres, and the project that we're talking about here would be completely within that fence confinement.
And you mentioned the traffic for the expansion. By that, do you mean the 350 megawatt gas-fired peaker plant that's currently under development?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, in terms of project objectives and we don't want you just reading from the slide, that gets very boring, but if you could just summarize for us what the objectives of this project are.
So we're trying to learn, this is Invenergy's first green hydrogen project. We're trying to learn how that we can pair a new technology like proton exchange membrane electrolyzers with a solar array. So we have a variable energy source in solar and a energy consumer in this proton exchange membrane electrolyzer. We want to see, how those interact with one another and how we can generate this and learn from it for larger projects. So we want to do it at the small scale, and that's why we referred to it as a research and development facility for Invenergy.
What is a proton exchange membrane electrolyzer?
So a PEM electrolyzer is a newer electrolyzer. You may be familiar with alkaline electrolyzers that have been around since 1800s. The PEM electrolyzer has been around about 60 years, and it is a way for breaking water H2O into H2 and O, where you'll vent the oxygen and you'll store the hydrogen. The membrane, sorry.
Please continue. No, go ahead, continue.
The membrane allows only hydrogen H2 to pass it and won't allow the oxygen. So it's a newer way for it's a new way to break water into oxygen and hydrogen.
What happens to the oxygen after the hydrogen's been removed?
It's vented to atmosphere.
Right. If we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And this obviously identifies the main equipment of the two parts of the project. Again, if you could summarize those for us first.
Yep. So the first portion is the solar energy system. We have solar modules that are going to be some of the newest technologies. They use bifacial, which means there's photovoltaics on the side that's facing the sun and the side that's facing the ground, so that it can capture energy that's reflected off of the ground. There's also going to be new tracker technology. Trackers are going to be tracking the sun across the sky. DC optimizers are taking the string of DC power from each row and optimizing it for the highest voltage possible. And the several optimizers will go into a DC to DC combiner box, which will then feed the inverter, which changes power from DC to AC. And then we'll have a bunch of met station or meteorology station, which will capture various different data that we'll find helpful for determining how performance and reliability is on the solar energy system. Then the other portion is the hydrogen energy system. The three main pieces of equipment are the electrolyzer, the compressor, and the storage tank. The images here show the trackers, which are newer because they allow for flexible modules. They'll have holes along the tube, which is called a torque tube. And these holes allow you to slide the brackets that mount these panels on them so that you can have various widths for panels. And this would allow us to test future wider panels. The picture below that is the PEM electrolyzer, and it's designed to be outdoors. It's about 7 foot tall locker cabinets. And we'll get into more of those details later on.
Okay, we could move to the next slide, please. This one's entitled Project Special Use Permit. Again, could you describe what's shown in the photo on the right?
Yep, so this is a picture of our project plot plan, and it's also an Appendix D, a more easy to see photo. But what you have here is the solar panels. There's full rows, and then you'll notice that there's 2 half rows if you're looking to the right of the full rows. Each one of those rows has the ability to generate 65 kilowatts. And we are petitioning to have solar that's built out all the way to our setback line so that we don't need to come for another special use permit if we decide to install more half rows. But what you see there is 9 full rows and 2 half rows. And if we were to extend those half rows out to the setback, that's how we get to 845 kilowatts of power. Initially, we're only going to have 2 half rows and see how they work. So that will be right around 650 kilowatts. Then we have up to 24 kilograms of green hydrogen, and the same idea will follow. So if you look closely, there's a T that's horizontal in this drawing, and that's the electrolyzer equipment. The horizontal part of the T, those are the cabinets that will be generating hydrogen. You'll see that there are 8 in total. The first part of this project, we only intend on installing 2 cabinets, which will generate up to 6 kilograms per hour. But again, we would like the permit to cover if we want to add the additional 3 other hydrogen blocks. So there's where the 24 comes from.
All right, if we could go to the next slide, please. This one's entitled Project Update. It should probably say project status, but could you describe what the current status of the project is?
So, excuse me, we are finishing up our engineering now, and Kiewit is our engineer of record. Kiewit's done a lot of good work for Invenergy. They're a well-known, reputable EPC contractor.
What's EPC?
Engineering, procurement, and construction. They're doing just the engineering for Sauk Valley Hydrogen LLC right now. And then as far as procurement goes, we're in the process of purchasing some of our main equipment. Supply chains are the biggest unknown right now because of different delays in equipment, and that may change our construction timeframe. But we think that if all of the equipment can be purchased this year, we see this taking 3 to 6 months to build. And then commissioning the project will be straightforward, and we expect it to only take 1 to 3 months.
Okay, we could go to the next one, please. Thank you. Now, Sauk Valley is requesting waivers from certain provisions of the Lee County zoning code. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, let's start with the first one. Special use, design standards, other standards and codes, and this deals with UL listings. And can you explain what it is that Sauk Valley is requesting be waived and why?
Sure. So we have 3 main pieces of equipment that we're requesting to be waived for UL listing. The 3 pieces of equipment are the solar trackers full rows, the solar tracker half rows, and the optimizers. The equipment is not UL certified, but is in the process of being UL certified. These manufacturers, they wouldn't build a prototype knowing that it wouldn't be able to pass a certain code or standard. They know what codes and standards are going to need to be applied. They're just in the process of passing UL certification. So Appendix S shows that email, but really what we have is subcomponents of the trackers that aren't fully UL certified. The full rows have a small panel on them called a power panel. And this power panel is just there to have power to send to the motors that are on the trackers to rotate the trackers. if there's one subcomponent that isn't UL certified, the entire thing is considered not UL certified. So it's a small subcomponent that once they do get UL certification later this year, they would swap out for the proper panels that have the UL certification. The half rows are a little bit different. They're called grade-free trackers, meaning you don't need to grade the ground before you try to install the trackers. This is a new product for Next Tracker, and this is one of their first ones that they're going to be installing in the field that's not on their test beds. So we're going to be monitoring it very closely. They still do intend on getting it UL certified later this year. And then the last thing is the optimizers. The optimizers are at the end, the south end of each row. And the company that has these, we're looking to get 65 kilowatt DC to DC optimizers because we want to have the ability to install larger panels. They have 45 kilowatt optimizers that are currently UL certified, but they're very close to certifying these ones. So we would petition to let us install a higher capacity so that we can install larger modules when those become available.
All right. If we could skip down, I hate to do this to the person operating the PowerPoint, but if you could go down 4 slides to the first slide that's labeled safety. There we go. Thank you. Mr. Lill, obviously the first question, is there any basis for any concern by the ZBA or the county board or anyone in the county for that matter with respect to the safety of any of this of any of the equipment that is not yet UL certified?
No.
And could you explain why with respect to what's being shown on this particular slide?
So the project has been designed to all of the applicable codes and standards. The UL certification and the UL certification for the trackers and optimizers are currently undergoing their processes, and we will get UL certification on this equipment at a later period of time. It's just when we are going out for this permit and for the building permit, they're currently not.
Right. And all of it will meet codes, is that correct?
Correct. All of the hydrogen equipment and any hydrogen equipment is going to need to pass vigorous NFPA and CGA and UL certifications, and all of those manufacturers know that, and they designed to meet those different codes and standards.
All right. If we could go now back up to the first waiver slide, please. Thank you. The next one is with respect to next requested waiver is a waiver of the requirement for a road use agreement. And could you explain why Sauk Valley is requesting a waiver of that requirement?
So we're going to be using very minimal roads, 3 miles of roads in total. And the estimated trucks that we're using are going to be 25 to 35 trucks or trip loads in total to build this project. And they'll all be using the same improved state and township roads. And these same roads were used when Invenergy was building Nelson Energy Center and there was no incidents. And we'll be using equipment that will be all under the applicable weight standards, and there'll be no oversized loads for this project.
So what we're talking about here is not 25 to 35 trucks per day. You're talking 25 to 35 trucks in total for the entire construction of the project?
Correct.
We could go to the next slide, please. The next one, next waiver that's being requested is with respect to stormwater management. Could you explain why that waiver is being requested?
So we are already on site of Nelson Energy Center, and we're just going to tie into their existing stormwater management system. The project does not have very much concrete, and it's not going to be creating runoff and doing so. Right now, it's a gravel parking lot. We intend to scrape the gravel and to install soil if necessary to get seed to grow and create a more permeable surface.
All right, the next one then is retention of all topsoil, and several of these are going to be for similar reasons, but could you explain why a waiver is being requested with respect to retention of topsoil?
So the project is a gravel parking lot, like I said. The picture that you had seen there was from last summer, and they've installed even more gravel since then. So there is not a lot of topsoil right now on the site, if any. And so, we'll be applying best engineering practices after we finish construction here. We plan to, like I said, grow grass seed, and it will be more permeable than it currently is.
All right, if we could go to the next slide now, please. All right, the next one is, I think we get these two, but just for the record, minimizing waiver of the requirement to minimize disturbance of prime farmland. Could you explain why the waiver is being requested?
So this was converted from agricultural when Nelson took over back, I don't even know when, but it's no longer zoned agricultural, it's zoned industrial. And there's not much prime farmland, if any, at our 5-acre site here.
And in fact, the entire 5-acre site is a gravel parking lot currently, correct?
Majority of it, not completely, but I'd say over half.
All right, there are no farming activities.
No.
And then the last one is waiver of the requirement for an agricultural impact mitigation agreement.
And again, same as the last couple. This is converted from agricultural, and therefore we don't see that it's a requirement.
And some of this material that's relating to the current use of the property and the fact that it's industrial and not farmland, that's covered by the Appendix Q, which is the Soil and Water Conservation District email. Is that correct?
Correct.
Next slide, please. This one requests a waiver with respect to modification to the solar energy system. Could you explain that one, please?
Yep. So when we were talking about those half rows extending beyond 2, we don't want to have to go and get another special use permit if we wanted to add a couple more of these half rows. And that's what this is intended for.
As I believe you said, that's why the request is for up to 845 kilowatts.
Correct.
And up to 24 kilograms per hour of hydrogen.
Correct.
Okay. And then the last one, waiver of the requirement for a land evaluation site assessment. What's the basis for that one?
So again, it's a zoned industrial. When we had reached out to Lee County Soil and Water District, they said that it's not applicable for us to have a Lisa because we are I3 industrial.
Mr. Lill, apart from the requested waivers that you've just talked about, and as reflected in the application that Sauk Valley Hydrogen has submitted, will all other requirements of the applicable Lee County ordinances be complied with?
Absolutely.
All right. Let's go to the next slide, please. We covered this one already. This is the first safety slide. So let's go to the next one. Because we all know safety is critical. If you could summarize what's being discussed here.
Yep. So these, the hydrogen energy system is installed outdoors for a reason. We don't want to entrain the hydrogen gas and let it build. So they're outdoors. There are fire hydrants around the layout just in case. And if, there were anything that would prevent it from spreading. There's also bollard posts that are around the equipment so that trucks cannot hit it. all equipment that is going to be carrying and storing hydrogen is going to be rated for the appropriate operating temp or operating pressures. There'll be safety valves in place to ensure that they are operated at the correct pressures that they're rated for.
Let me stop you there
also-
for a moment. Yeah, let me stop you there for a moment, Mr. Lil. I think you mentioned that the existing and operating Nelson Energy Center natural gas plant currently uses hydrogen. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what does it use it for?
Generator cooling.
And how does Nelson Energy, if you know, currently get its hydrogen?
They have a truck that comes by every month and delivers it, and they unload it into their fixed storage tank that we'll show you in these appendix here.
All right. And is the plan for this proposed facility to replace that hydrogen truck delivery method?
Yes.
All right. If you could go on, please, now with respect to this slide.
Okay. So the Nelson Energy Center as a power plant has an existing relationship with the Rock Falls and Sterling fire departments. We've contacted them and let them know our plans here, and we will update any fire protection plans that are necessary and identify different hazardous zones with the fire department if this project does get built. And safety is at the forefront of any project that we build, and it's just especially important here because, like I said, this is our first hydrogen project. We want it to be a success here, and we hope to have Lee County support.
And is Sauk Valley Hydrogen's plan to develop an emergency strike that? To your knowledge, does the current operating Nelson Energy facility have in place an emergency response plan that was developed in consultation with the local fire departments?
Yes, they do.
And is Sauk Valley Hydrogen's plan to develop an emergency response plan in consultation and with comment and input from the relevant fire departments?
Absolutely.
All right. If we could go to the next one, please. And this one's entitled Community Impact. And could you explain what Sauk Valley is discussing here?
So yeah, Sauk Valley Hydrogen is designed as would be said as a demonstration project. It's a small scale R&D facility for us to take our learnings and to develop larger, more successful projects. We're looking to build strong relationships with local community members, and we're also willing to host community college students from Sauk Valley Community College and learn about this unique project, renewable energies, and the future technologies we have here.
Speaking particularly about learning and teaching opportunities, are you familiar with the growing development of green hydrogen production in the U.S.?
I am.
Could you describe that generally, please?
So with the Build Back Better plan, there's more and more talk about green hydrogen. It's now, getting a lot of hype around it. There's talk about it specifically having production tax credits and expanding into different markets across all of industries and across transportation. And the beauty of it is if you're creating green hydrogen from a renewable energy resource, you're having no emissions from generation of it into use case of it. And that's pretty rare for a lot of things nowadays.
Typically, the way hydrogen is developed now, is it in fact green?
No.
Why not?
It's called gray hydrogen if you create it nowadays, and you're using a method where you're taking natural gas and then you're also using steam, which you make using natural gas, and you're breaking apart the methane molecule in a brute force way that releases a lot of carbons in the process, carbon emissions in the process. Now there's different classifications. If you were to capture that carbon that you're emitting, you'd call it blue hydrogen. Because we don't have any carbon. If we're taking it from a renewable energy resource that's clean, we get rid of the carbon completely. And what we're left is just from production to consumption, no emissions in the process.
Thank you. All right, could we now go to Appendix A, please, the solar technology slide? Thank you. And could you, starting with the one on the left, could you tell us what we're looking at here?
Yep. So this is a view from behind a solar, a tracking system, a solar tracking row. And you can see that there are panels on the backside that she's under, and that's called a bifacial module. There to the right of that, this is that same project, and she's standing underneath one of the wider solar rows, and those are called 2P or 2 portrait panels. And then you'll see the skinnier rows are called single P panels. And that's what we'll have here for our demonstration project. That you can see is 200 kilowatts. We'd be, a little bit more than double that to start. We'll be around 500 kilowatts without having any additional of those half trackers that we talked about. And then just to show the difference in scale is the picture below that shows 160 megawatt commercial scale project.
Could we go to Appendix B now, please? And could you describe what we're seeing here?
Yep. So this is a 3D rendering of the proton exchange membrane electrolyzer. You have different cabinets here that each have a different job, where the power will come into a distribution cabinet. Distribution cabinet will send majority of its power to the power cabinet located to the right of it. This power is then in that power cabinet, you'll change from AC back to DC power or direct current. And that direct current will be sent into the green hydrogen cabinet where water will also be sent. And that's where you'll be splitting H2O into H2 and O, venting the O and compressing and storing the H2. The cooling cabinet behind that is going to cool the hydrogen gas, and the telemetry will just make sure that all of the communications between cabinets are working. The picture to the right of that shows the different trays. The top tray will carry the hydrogen gas. The middle tray will carry the electrical wires between cabinets, and the water on the bottom tray will carry the water between cabinets.
And then could we look at Appendix C, please? And
So
tell
the
us what-
picture to the right is the existing air gas tank that's on site at Nelson Energy Center. This is the tank that gets refilled monthly, and it's refilled with something similar to the picture on the upper right-hand corner, which is called a tube trailer. So the picture below that is a fixed hydrogen storage. It's basically like the tube trailer without the wheels. The tubes will undergo a different certification process. Instead of DOT, they'll undergo ASME, which is American Society of Mechanical Engineers.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lill. Judge Slavin, that's all I have for Mr. Lill.
All right.
I'll request that petitioners 1 through 5 move the admission is probably the wrong phrase for this.
I've been using it for lack of a better idea, and
Right. I've been doing it. You and I've been doing this too long
Yeah.
to call it anything else. So I'll move the admission of petitioners 1 through 5.
done. And that's having finished your questions, it is a perfect time for a break. So let's take 10 minutes, and the floor. Well, I'll call for questions. of Mr. Lil.
Thank you.
10 minutes, 10 after. Yeah. These chairs aren't the most comfortable either, especially for a taller guy like you. All righty, let's get back in session. And it's time for questions of this witness. And I remind you, Mr. Lill, you're still under oath. Going around the horn. How about you, Mr. Boonstra?
Not back in here yet.
Okay, we'll skip him for a minute. Here he comes. Oh, questions, Mr. Boonstra?
Just briefly, thank you. From the application for the special use and through your PowerPoint, it seems to show that you're looking for a list of waivers. Is there a reason as to why there was not a petition for a variance on any of these?
Judge Slavin, I can probably address that. I think that's more of a
Well,
legal
the
question
question-
than a factual
I
question.
appreciate that, but the question is to
Yeah.
Mr. Lill. If he doesn't know.
All right,
Sure.
all right, that's fine.
So variance, you just mean alter or a change to the
You're asking for an exception for the code, basically.
correct.
So that's the question. It's just, was there a reason why a variance was not requested? And if you don't know, you don't know. I just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I don't want to mix like the difference between a variance and a waiver.
Sure.
I don't know at this time what the difference really is between those two.
Yeah, understood. Appreciate it. Thank you. Nothing further.
Ms. Duffy.
So you said that the hydrogen is cooled?
Yes,
How is it cooled?
it is cooled with the 50-50 glycol water mix.
Oh, 50-50. Okay. Yeah. Can you explain a little more?
50% glycol, 50% water in a closed loop. And then like a thin fan cooler, same idea where a fan will cool that loop that circulates that water to cool the gas. And there is no discharge of water at all in this hydrogen energy system.
And if it gets too hot, shuts down, or what's the,
If it gets too hot, I'm sure it would shut down, but I would rather the original equipment manufacturer provide a better answer to you.
that's all. Thank you.
Okay, turning to ZBA members.
Judge.
Yes.
Alice would like to ask.
Oh, I'm sorry, Alice. I'm sorry.
That's okay. According to your application, you're using a cab system. Will those lines be buried?
So the lines that are going in parallel with the rows, they'll be underneath the tracker, or I'm sorry, so the tube that's running north and south with the row, the wires will be underneath that in a cab system on a hanger. And then the wires in between the rows will be buried. So you really, if you're looking from above, you won't see any wires because the panels will be covering them. But the wires will run underneath the modules themselves. And then at the end, the south end of the row, they'll go into their DC optimizer, and then they'll be buried from row to row to row into the inverter.
Where are you at as far as a contract with PJM or ComEd? Do you have an agreement?
So we're working with ComEd right now, and we have they've told us that we have up to 500 kilowatt interconnection with them, where we'd be able to send 500 kilowatts to the grid or pull 500 kilowatts from the grid in a net metering setup.
And that is finalized.
No,
At what point do you expect that to be finalized?
I would expect it to occur after we, if we are granted a special use permit in the next couple of months, we would sign something with ComEd to get the transformer, because we'd actually be leasing the transformer from them. and then the interconnection as well.
Do you plan to have that agreement in place prior to the issuance of any building permits?
No,
With, you said there'll be venting of the oxygen.
yes,
Is there any hydrogen gas being vented?
no. Well, we do have vents in place to vent to atmosphere if necessary, but hydrogen is a non-toxic gas, and there's no emissions involved with it.
Flammability?
It is a flammable gas, but the venting is done in a way that it's diluted with ambient air.
So there are no concerns for any type of combustion related to that hydrogen gas venting?
All applicable codes and standards are going to be followed, so it's always vented to a safe place to atmosphere, away from anyone that's going to be working on it, away from electrical equipment. The vents are in place for safety. That answers.
How tall are the vents?
I believe they are over 10 feet tall. But I can follow up with that one as well.
The county code requires Knox boxes at the entrances for emergency purposes. Will your project have Knox boxes?
We can install, or we can have knock boxes, yeah.
What type of lighting do you propose for the project?
So we're thinking similar to like a street lighting, something so that if people are working on anything at night that they can see and they can, do it in a safe manner,
Well, go ahead.
but not in a way that's going to also create an irritant or, we don't want to be blinding people on Nelson Road either. It's going to be a dimmed light or a light that's shined just to help our workers.
Shielded and downcast?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a weed and grass control plan?
We have a long list of seeds that we would propose to use. If that qualifies as our plan, I think, what we plan to do was to scrape the, layer of gravel that's there. And if we need to add soil so that we can grow seeds and grow grass, we'll do so. But is that a sufficient plan? Or is
She
that-
didn't answer your question. You answer her questions.
Would Sauk Valley Hydrogen be willing to submit a formalized weed and grass control plan prior to the issuance of any building permits?
Yes.
Stormwater management, that is required by our ordinance. You're asking for a waiver. Scratch that. With regard to drainage, if there is any damage to any tile or drainage system, will any damage be repaired and restored to the same or better condition?
Absolutely.
Is Sauk Valley Hydrogen, have they contacted local drainage districts as of today?
No, we have not.
Would you be willing to?
Yes.
Do you have any verification that there'll be no communication interference?
Can you repeat that, please?
Do you have any verification that there will be no communication interference?
I don't know that answer right now, but I will follow up. Verification on no communication interference. Communication meaning
Telecommunications?
telecommunications. We will not have interference with telecommunications.
But you don't have a formal verification from any government authority stating no interference expected?
No.
That's all I have.
All right, to the ZBA, Mr. Forster. Questions?
You call this an experimental or I don't want to say experimental, but it's a test for what you might do other places, or is it also a test to see whether this works and it may expand?
We're doing it at a small scale because it is a research and development facility. We are going to be testing the performance and reliability of different modules, of different trackers that we haven't previously installed. So that's where it becomes more of an experiment for us, if you call it that. But we're going to be applying all of the proper codes and standards that make it safe. We don't want to be thinking that it's an experiment. It's
Research and development.
yeah.
We'll just use that word instead. But will this be enough hydrogen for the current plant?
Yes.
Okay. So unless you do something different out there, it won't expand any further than what it is.
Right.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Mr. Burrow?
Yes, Mr. Lib. Will this hydrogen generating facility run 24 hours a day then?
No, not expected to. It's intended to use the solar generation that we make on site to produce hydrogen. And it is connected to the grid to allow for us to run it at night as well, when and if we would like to do that.
But based on the production you need, it doesn't need to run 24 hours a day then?
Correct.
Okay, and where do you store the hydrogen then? The excess, if you have any?
So the plot plan will show these three rectangles, and those are the ground. One of those is the ground storage. The other areas would be for a tube trailer to come and pick up, and it can be taken off-site for use in any other application that needs hydrogen.
Dealing with some of the previous questions, and for the fire departments and this type of thing with possibility of flame sometime or whatever, what type of material do you use to put out a hydrogen fire or
Just regular old water.
regular water?
It's not like a battery where you pour sand on it or something like that. You vent it to atmosphere and you disconnect the electricity and you use water.
Thank you. We're cooling the generator. What is the temperature of the generators, do you think?
I don't know off the top of my head. It's a good question.
What's the temperature of the hydrogen that once you get it made then roughly?
There's another good question. It is created at 30 bar or 400 PSIG. As far as temperature goes, it is going to be ambient for the most part. Now we cool it. That's to cool the cabinet itself as well, not just the gas.
Getting on to the solar part, what direction are the rows running then?
North and south.
North and south, and then they rotate
track east to west.
And installing these solar panel rows, what's the process for installing the rows?
Yeah, so you put in piling into the ground, which is just like an I-beam. And then on that I-beam will sit what's called a torque tube. The torque tube where it is running north and south with on top of the pilings. And then the panels will sit on the torque tube, and the torque tube will operate moving to track the sun.
What type of motor or whatever turns the panels up during the day?
So it is just a motor. There's a couple of motors on each row, and those motors are fed power from the power panels, which, if you remember, that's the UL certification that's currently that we currently don't have yet.
And some about drainage discussion. What is the grade or the slope for that lot that you've got now roughly?
It's very level. It's a parking lot, so it needs to be right now for us. I don't know off the top of my head, but there are some, the topographic drawing will show the 2 to 4 foot contour lines, and it's really flat.
It's basically flat, okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Bothy? No question. Mr. Pratt?
So this permit is a special use for solar farm, a generating solar farm. And then you call the hydrogen a green hydrogen power generation facility. But you stated it's used for cooling.
So the on-site hydrogen is used for cooling. The generator that is for the larger power plant. The electrolyzer that we have that's in the 5 acre site, that is separate from that. I guess I don't understand exactly.
I'm basic question is, how can this be power generation when it's used for cooling? The hydrogen.
The hydrogen that we're producing, how can it be higher, or how can it be power generation?
Right. You call it power generation. This is what the permit is for power generation. But it's used for cooling, the way I understood your testimony.
It can be used for power generation. It can be used for, it's an energy, and we're calling it a hydrogen energy system, and you can transfer that energy elsewhere. That can be used in forklifts. It can be used in fuel cells, lots of different other electrical generation uses.
Your testimony was that it's going to be used for cooling, correct?
Part of it was going to be used for cooling. A portion of it will be used for cooling. And
So the other thing you said about you call this green hydrogen as opposed to blue hydrogen or carbon-based hydrogen. So is the modules that are making the carbon or the hydrogen radically different technology?
the solar modules,
The what?
the solar modules.
No,
Or-
the modules that are making, what was the term for that
Pro-
makes the hydrogen, that separates the hydrogen?
a proton exchange membrane
Yeah.
electrolyzer.
You stated that the old way of making hydrogen is you power forced it or impacted it.
Yeah.
And shut
So-
off carbon.
Yeah.
So is this a brand new technology that,
So this is another way to make hydrogen. There's the version that I was referring to where you take natural gas and then you boil water and you use brute force basically to make a bunch of hydrogen. That would be called Haber-Bosch method. And we're using a totally different way to make hydrogen called electrolysis. And we don't need natural gas to to make hydrogen in this way. It's a more gentle process that all you need is water and power. You don't need natural gas. Natural gas carries hydrocarbons. Methane, CH4 is hydrogen rich. And that's why they use it to produce a lot of hydrogen nowadays, is because it's easy to do. Now, green hydrogen is becoming more and more popular because there's starting to be more recognition around decarbonizing different sectors, and that includes the generation of hydrogen.
Technology you're using here is not experimental technology.
No, it's been around since 1960.
So you also stated that the equipment to make the hydrogen will be outside.
Yeah.
The reason for that.
Typically, you do not want to contain hydrogen in buildings because you risk the gas building up, and because it's odorless, you wouldn't even know it's building up. So it's best to have it in an open field so that if there is a leak, then it just goes right to atmosphere and you would never know.
Is there going to be any batteries on site for storing any excess electricity produced? No. So to the question of the waivers, one of the waivers is it goes to the modifications that you want to make as you experiment. Can you give us any parameters of the changes that would be created by that?
So we would ask to add additional trackers without needing another special use permit. We basically want to be able to add more rows of panels within this 5 acres if we wanted to. If we found that these half rows are successful and they're doing great, and we have the ability to install more and stay within our special use permit, that's what we'd like to do. We're not going to go outside of the 5 acres here. I mean,
No, I'm more concerned with the actual equipment. You've stated that these panels are going to be 10 foot high.
panels won't be 10 foot high. The vent to atmosphere.
I thought I read somewhere in your thing that the panels would be 10 foot.
If it
Solar trackers will remain under 10 foot.
yeah, I can't tell you exactly how tall they're going to be at all phases. I mean, they'll be under 10 feet. I don't know if that'll be 5 feet or 10 feet, but
the problem is if you make modifications, put new panels, will they remain under 10 foot?
yes, I mean,
That's where we get into trouble with your asking of the waiver.
yeah.
Can you give us some parameters of where the maximum height would be and the maximum amount of changes that you would possibly make?
But we can plan to install where the absolute maximum height would be is 10 feet. And then that would account, we'll have a certain factor where we'll add, an additional, I don't know how many feet, just to account for future expansions. But typically these modules are not getting much longer or taller. They're getting more photovoltaics per panel.
Okay. Another one of your waivers that you asked for is the road use agreements. Why not go through the process of creating a road use agreement? It should be relatively simple, I would assume.
It is not it's not that simple. And it's using 3 miles of well-established and really sound roads. They're not, we were using these roads when all of Nelson was being built, and that was, 25 to 35 trucks a day. And we never had to file for any kind of road use agreements during that time. We're not using anything beyond what a semi truck can carry.
Another question, you stated there's a fence around some of this property already.
Sure.
So will you build another fence to meet the code?
No, the fence already meets the applicable codes that are listed in the SUP. or the ordinance.
Okay, I think that's enough. No more questions.
Okay. Mr. Hughes?
Yeah, a lot of things I had here were already addressed, but getting back to maybe branching off of Mr. Pratt's questions relative to the power generated by the SES. You indicated that that excess can be added to the grid. Are you you're selling it to the grid?
Yeah, so we'll have a net meter set up with ComEd. If something in our hydrogen system is broken, like a compressor is down for maintenance, we want the ability to still use the power. We don't want it to just sit there. So we'll connect with ComEd and it'll have the flexibility to push power onto the grid or pull power from the grid.
Okay, and then I had heard you mention, Alice, that it was a net system, so you only pay. Yeah, it's a balance. So if you're kicking stuff in or if you're pulling stuff off, you're okay.
Yep, just like a net meter if you had it for your house. If you had solar panels at your house and you were generating more than what you use, you wouldn't pay anything.
Okay. You've talked about the components. Just give me a definition of what a hydrogen energy system is. I think that may help Mr. Pratt as well. Because you've talked about different components to it, but what are you referring to as a hydrogen energy system?
The system that produces hydrogen.
Okay, so what we're talking about are the electrolyzer. That's basically the system.
Yeah, so there's not very much components to this. It's an electrolyzer, a compressor, and somewhere to put the compressed hydrogen in, so storage. There's three main components that comprise of that hydrogen energy system.
Okay, and the SES is generating, and this is where you're talking about, we're getting into the code and stuff, but the SES is generating the power to power that HES, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And if you have more than you need for the HES, you can push it off into the grid.
Exactly.
Okay. And again, clarification, the hydrogen that's being generated by that will go to substitute what you're currently using in your main facility, the power facility there.
Correct.
Okay. Any excess you'll sell?
Yeah. So we'll have those fixed storage there, and when the gas plant needs hydrogen, we'll send it to them. If we're producing so much that our tanks are already full, then we can have a tube trailer pull up and they can take hydrogen just like they were delivering it previously. It's no different.
Okay. Hydrogen use cases. Is that the storage that you're talking about, or because you've got a couple of different forms of hydrogen storage, but the terminology, the hydrogen use case.
Yeah, that's just the generator cooling. That's the use case that's on site there at Nelson. So
I missed something there. Go ahead and repeat that again.
So Nelson is currently using hydrogen. So we wanted to build this project somewhere that already uses that already consumes hydrogen. So I'm just saying, like, there's a use case here at Nelson because they are already purchasing it.
Okay. So you're talking about, okay, I understand. Alice had asked about the height of the hydrogen vents in the application. It talks about 20-foot high. How many of these will there be?
We're still finalizing engineering. I can tell you there's at least one of these. that will be 10 to 20 feet tall. Did it say up to 20 feet?
Yeah, I can't remember the exact wording, but yeah, 20 foot.
Yeah, so they'll follow specific compressed gas association limits. That's CGA. But when engineering is complete, I can get you a better answer than there will be for sure one. But we're still finishing engineering.
I didn't know if there was going to be a certain number per electrolyzer.
No, there will be one, and there probably will be one per electrolyzer. If we were to add additional electrolyzers to complete that horizontal block I was talking about to get to 24, we would add additional vents for additional electrolyzers.
Okay. Security cameras. You're looking at using security cameras. How will those be monitored? Where will they be directed?
Yeah, so the Nelson Energy Center is staffed 24/7, and they already have a security system to ensure safety. We would install a couple of cameras out there on the 5-acre site, and we would tie directly into their control system where they're monitoring it 24/7, just like it's a gas plant. They're, walking it down, ensuring that everything looks good and lights are on and it's safe. That's another reason we love it here at Nelson, is staff 24/7.
Okay. Nothing's directed at the road.
No.
Nothing's directed at the exterior fences where they might include comings and goings of neighbors.
No.
Okay. I didn't think so, but I wanted to clarify. And relative to the FAA criteria, I assume that's referencing Dixon Municipal Airport?
Yep, Whiteside.
Oh, Whiteside. Okay.
Well, Mr. Burrow, let him answer the question.
Yeah, he did say Whiteside. Okay. Answered that. Yeah, let's already answer. Cleaning the modules. The application stated 50 gallons annually. Now there's almost 1,200, not quite 1,200 by my calculations. I think about 1,196 or something like that, or 694. 50 gallons of water annually to clean the SES modules.
Yeah, that was an estimation. We actually hardly ever clean modules nowadays. It's used by rainwater. And you have to be very sensitive as to what you clean those modules with. So we had a number in there, so it wasn't zero, but our other demonstration facility that was shown on the appendices there, they have not cleaned their modules. And, depending on how dusty it is here, we see very limited cleaning that will be necessary.
Okay. And I'm going to stay on the water aspect. You're pulling the water for the hydrogen from the Rock River.
The water will be from the Rock River, yes.
Okay. And so the electrolysis will be a matter of breaking down the water, turning it into air and oxygen and hydrogen.
Right.
How much water are you going to be pulling out of the Rock River per year for this process, or per month?
I have it in gallons per minute as less than 1 gallon per minute. But let me get a calculator. I can tell you what it is per month, per year. So we would be pulling 1,440 gallons per day.
1,140. That's a fair amount of water coming out when you, and then multiplying that by 365 and however many years that's operational. Do you not have to make any type of contact with the Department of Natural Resources or?
This is actually a very small amount of water in respects to what the Nelson permit currently has. The permit right now has over, I think it's 300 gallons per minute for Nelson to pull from the Rock River. So it'd be 1 out of 300 of that gallon per minute.
Okay. The water that you're currently pulling out, does that get recycled? Because that's you, what's that used for, predominantly cooling?
It is used for generating steam in a heat recovery steam generator. And that is to increase the efficiency of our gas plant to make it a combined cycle. So you have a gas turbine, a heat recovery steam generator that takes the exhaust from that gas turbine, and then it will drive a steam turbine using that Rock River water that's purified. Now, any water that gets cleaned and filtered goes back to the Rock River.
Okay. So right now your 300 gallons is being recycled and then goes back into the Rock River. Whereas this that's making the hydrogen is going into the air. And hydrogen is disappearing. The oxygen is going into the air.
Yeah, it's a very small amount of water though. Like there's much more water that's being going up into the air with the cooling that's being done at Nelson.
Okay. Jobs. Any new jobs going to be added with the SES and the HES?
I am not positive right now if we'll be able to include, or if we'll add any additional jobs. There'll be certainly jobs for construction.
Okay, for construction, but in terms of operational, you've got men at the current facility, so you're unsure if.
Yeah, I'm not sure that this will require any additional staffing. The guys that are the staff that's already there, they already do handle some of these gases, and I think that we would probably wait to see how much extra work it is.
Okay. And I think this was answered indirectly, but the power cables for the inverter and to the transformer and the switchgear, that's all going to be underground.
Correct.
The only thing above ground will be what's running between the or what's running
Under the panels.
under the panels.
Yep.
And I think from the standpoint of topsoil, you actually indicated that for this site, you may be bringing soil back into the site. You're going to be getting rid of the gravel and maybe bringing soil back into the site, correct?
If it's required to reestablish grass, then we will make sure that there is soil that will be able to support the growth of grass.
Okay. And then in the solar glare report, discrete observation point, what's that reference to?
Can you use it in the contents? Sorry.
Well, in the glare report, they use the terminology discrete observation point. I think I know what it is, but I want clarification.
Was this in the exhibit or the appendices, or is in the?
Yes. I thought it was in the assumptions, but I'm not finding it right now.
But it was just like, you wanted to know what was meant by discrete observation point.
Yes.
I can
If
circle
I'm-
back on.
If I may, Judge, to clarify, it's on the 4th page of Appendix N. It's actually discrete observation receptors. I believe that's what
Oh,
the member is referring to. It's about the middle of the page. These pages aren't numbered either, unfortunately, but it's the 4th page of the report.
yeah. Discrete observation receptors. Yeah. Thank you.
They're also called OP for observation point.
So we did this model in-house. I honestly did not put this report together. We have a solar engineer that did put it together for us. He is not on the call, but discrete observation receptors. What the model does is it looks at the roads, the airports, and any other neighbors that are around and determines if there is indicated glare. And, unfortunately, I don't exactly know what this discrete observation receptors are referring to, but I can find out.
Okay. I don't believe it's major because I was assuming the same thing that you just described in terms of the general observation points, but I didn't know what the clarification for discrete observation was.
Yeah, I apologize. I don't know either.
Not a problem. You also referenced foundations, but there's not much said about it. Yeah, on page 7, point or paragraph A, foundations. All foundations will be within the project site, will be designed and stamped. What foundations are those referring to?
So if you look at page 8,
Yep.
it's hard to see, but there is a cement foundation that's around it's a light gray line that's what the cement foundation is referring to. So the electrolyzer will sit on the cement foundation. The compressor will, as well as the storage.
Okay,
So all of that will be on the concrete pads, and then we'll have an asphalt driveway that will come into from that south of the main entrance.
okay. I just wanted to make sure. I didn't know if there was any The specific buildings involved, basically, I know the electrolyzer's a cabinet style situation. And that's sitting on a pad. So basically, you're just referring to the foundations or the pads for the equipment.
Correct. And the transformer will have one as well. So very minimal concrete foundations here.
I believe you stated there would be no odors emanating from the process.
Correct.
What about electromagnetic fields? Does this combination have any creation of electromagnetic fields?
No.
This was kind of asked for before, but what type of heat is generated by the equipment, whether the SES, and I know that that's meant to predominantly absorb, but what type of heat's generated? Probably more by the HES.
So the inefficiencies of electrolyzer, it results in heat. And that's why you need that cabinet to cool that heat that's generated. If it were to get over a certain temperature, I will verify it, but I'm sure that they'll have safety systems in place where the machine will just shut off. Other than that is the primary use, is stack inefficiencies create heat, and that's.
If I'm standing within 10 feet of that electrolyzer, will I feel the heat?
No.
Okay.
It's like your AC, like if you put your hand over it, you'll feel heat coming off of that, projecting heat from your house. That's a very similar idea here with the cooling cabinet.
And although hydrogen is explosive, you've already indicated that the stacks are set to release that safely. Any other potential flammable materials used in the process?
No.
Are there any toxic or noxious materials used in the process?
No.
Because there was one I just wanted to. Give me a moment here. Yeah, all hazardous materials related to construction, operation, and maintenance of the SES and dispose of the same in accordance with federal, state, and local laws. I just wanted to clarify that there aren't any hazardous, that's a boilerplate terminology.
Yeah. I think what that is referring to is like any equipment that will be used, like a Bobcat or anything to move dirt, will make sure that there is no spills or anything like that.
Okay, because it does say construction and operation, so just wanted to clarify that point. And I think that would be the end of my questions.
Thank you. I have a number of questions, and Mr. Lil, please understand that the job of the ZBA is to report to the county board what evidence there is, there wasn't, as it addresses the Lee County ordinance. So a lot of these are just fill in the blank sort of things, okay? The ordinance talks in terms about power being sold to the grid. I assume that any net extra power you distribute through the ComEd system would be paid. ComEd would pay you for that power. You would sell it to them. Is that correct?
Yes.
You say in the application that the project will be engineered to meet all applicable standards and codes. I assume that ought to be footnoted except for those without UL listing. Is that present UL listing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In the application, you indicate, I'm still confused about this, that the solar trackers will remain under 10 feet. And maybe you explained this and I just got a thick head. How about the modules? Are the tops of the modules at any point in their rotation going to be higher than 10 feet?
So when the modules reset to go back to their starting position, they will rotate
Right.
to their high point.
Is the high point higher than 10?
That is what will design them to be below that 10 if
Okay.
that's a sticking
Thank you.
point.
Well, that's what the ordinance requires. That's what I'm asking. So they will be under 10 feet.
When in operation.
Okay. In the application, you indicate, not you personally, but the application indicates that there will be hydrogen safety vents of 20 feet. In your direct testimony today, you testified they will be 10 feet. Do you know which is more accurate?
Like I said, we are still in the process of finalizing detailed engineering. It will be under 20 feet. But as far as if it's 10, 15, 20, I can't tell you specifically what it is today.
Okay. The security cameras, will they all be directed inward to the project?
Yes.
If there are drainage tiles and after you contact the drainage districts and they maybe indicate there are drainage tiles there, if they are damaged, within what time frame will they be repaired?
I would say as soon as possible.
Well, would it be within 14 days, for instance?
I would say within 3 months.
You ran, understandably, correctly, ran the IDNR EcoCat survey, and it showed no record of various things. How about, was there any record of any historic sites?
No.
Did they say whether there was any historic sites one way or another? I just didn't read in the EcoCat results that they mentioned historic sites at all.
Yeah, I would need to look through that again to see myself if it had any historic.
In the application, you promised to be a good neighbor and use commercially reasonable efforts to mitigate any interference. You don't say communication interference, but does that refer to communication interference?
Yes.
Again, I'm still confused about this, and I realize it's been addressed, but the application says, like Mr. Hughes noted, that you'd use 50 gallons to clean the module. Now, I understand you're saying that you may not even clean the modules, but let's say it's particularly dusty and there's 1,200 modules. Would you agree that that means there'd be less than a cup of water to clean each module? Is that correct?
We would have to update the county with what water we use.
Well, the ordinance requires you to say how much water you're using. So I'm just asking, you said 50, is that inaccurate? Is that a typo? Is it inaccurate? Or do you know how much water you would use?
I do not know how much water we would use. Like I said, we would typically let rainwater clean our modules so that it may be consistent. But like you said, if it's particularly dusty and we need to use more water, we can certainly update the county in the ordinance of what we're using.
There's no mention in the in the application if there will be any real estate tax income or increase or decrease from this project. Do you know what evaluation effect the proposed project would have on the Invenergy Nelson plant?
Okay, I'm sorry, can you repeat that? What
Sure.
effect?
The application does not address whether or not there would be a real estate tax increase from this real estate improvement. Do you know if there would be a valuation increase because of the addition of this SES?
I don't know.
You said you don't know if there's be any increased employment in-house. There would be, I think you said, an increase in construction jobs. Do you know how many construction jobs would be added for I think you said 3 to 6 months of construction?
No, without having a contractor on board yet, we don't know those numbers.
Would the power cable from the combination inverter and the pad transformer to the switch gear be underground as well?
Yes.
Is the fence on the south side of the proposed SES parcel 3 feet inside the common property line with the adjoining farm?
Just looking at the survey to see if it has that. I don't know at this time. We can find out. But 3 feet between the property line of the south property owner and our fence line.
Is the fence on the south side of the parcel where you're proposing to put the SES 3 feet inside the common property line with the farmer on the adjoining farmer? All right. You said, in answer to a question, you said you provide a Knox box, and this is silly, but I just got to follow it up. Would the Knox box also have keys to the gate inside the Knox box?
Yes.
You said that there would be pilings to support the racks and so forth. How would the pilings be secured? Would there be a cement foundation, or would they'd just be secured by packed earth?
They would just go into the ground.
During the operation of the proposed SES, would there be any vibrations?
No.
How about during construction?
Minimal.
Would there be any particle emissions from the proposed SES? We're not talking the hydrogen, from the proposed SES
No.
array.
No.
Would there be any particle emissions during construction?
No.
I'm not sure I understood the answer to Mr. Hughes's question. Would there be any, during the operation of the SES, would it create any electromagnetic fields?
No. There's no magnets here.
How far away could any heat from the system be felt?
I will ask the manufacturer, but I can't tell you off the top of my head what it.
You say minimal heat would be created, which what I think you said, what would be the temperature nearest any equipment producing heat?
Again, I'd have to go back to the manufacturer to figure out specifically what the temperatures would be and
would the construction of the proposed SES involve the use of any explosive or particularly flammable materials?
no.
During operation and construction, how is human waste disposed of? How would human waste be disposed of?
We have bathrooms on site that will be used. If not, porta potties.
Does Sauk Valley Hydrogen LLC agree to be bound by all statements and affirmations made in its application and in your testimony?
Yes.
Is it correct that photovoltaics are an integral part of a solar energy system?
Yes.
Do those photovoltaics have any effect on surrounding flora or fauna?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, the last one, I just couldn't keep up with you. What pieces of equipment are you contemplating that you might add that you're asking that a new SUP be waived?
So we would be adding additional half trackers.
So
And
those are half rows or half trackers?
I'm
I get
sorry,
the
half-
terminologies. I get them
rows.
mixed up.
half rows.
Okay.
And then we would also be adding additional hydrogen and power cabinets. If you remember the 3D rendering, there are two of those, a power cabinet and a hydrogen cabinet. If we were to have the addition, we would add an additional 4 total, where you would add, there's 8 cabinets that we would plan for. 2 of them will be installed if this project gets complete, or if this project gets its special use permit. And then we would add an additional 6, which would complete the what the vendor calls the electrolyzer stamp. And that would be a total of 1.2 megawatts worth of electrolyzers. Right now, we're only installing 1/4 of those.
But, and correct me if I'm wrong, those cabinets would not be part of the SES system. Is that correct?
They will be integrated into the SES system.
Okay. Okay, so we got half rows and maybe hydrogen and power cabinets.
Yep.
What else? If anything.
Compressors for the additional electrolyzers. And potentially additional storage.
But that wouldn't that be part of the HES system and not the SES system?
Correct.
All right, thanks. Yes, sir.
think you missed Rex to ask any.
Well, Rex was the alternate, so I'm saving him for last.
I knew that. I just wanted
Rex,
to
go ahead.
remind you of that.
Questions?
How much hydrogen storage capacity is at Nelson now?
There is 30,000 standard cubic feet of storage.
How much will you be adding?
We will have a tube trailer that, or I'm sorry, a fixed hydrogen storage that will be greater than that, approximately 135,000 standard cubic feet.
How much does a semi-tube trailer haul?
That's the exact same number.
What's a cubic foot of hydrogen cost?
I don't know off the top of my head.
That's all.
Okay, back around, Mr. Blazer, any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Very good. You may step down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further witnesses, Mr. Blazer? I'm raising my head because I'm not going to crane my neck.
Yeah, I do. Mr. Schrader will be testifying, but I see that we're about 13 minutes shy of the time limit.
You think you'll be
I'm thinking
much longer than that?
between direct and potential follow-up questions, potentially. So I'm thinking, since we're coming back Wednesday anyway,
Right.
I mean, I can certainly start them, but I think it may make
No,
more sense.
I'd rather not.
Yeah.
Because you were indicating just one witness and I thought, okay, but all right. We will then.
I thought we were going to have one witness, but I think we need to clarify some of the questions that came up on from the ZBA and from you.
All right, we'll then recess from tonight and everybody. Oh, interested party. God. Thank you. And thank you for asking me. Sorry. When I made this, my own scheduling goof up, we informally pulled everybody to see if they could be here on Wednesday, which is day after tomorrow. Is that still the case? Mr. Blomstrom? Yes. Alice? B. Callie? Bruce? Greg? Rex? Mike? Gene? Glenn? Mr. Blazer, you and yours?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We'll recess until Wednesday evening, the 16th of March at 6 p.m. Once again, here in the old courtroom of the old Lee County Courthouse. Everybody have a good one. Enjoy the warm weather.
Thank you very much.